Hello, and welcome to the SparcStart TA Leader Series, where we talk to some of the leading people in the industry about interesting programs they have going, thoughts that they're thinking, and questions they're asking. Today, I'm thrilled to have Brandon with us. Brandon, would you introduce yourself to our audience, please?
Yes, absolutely. My name is Brandon Davis. I am the head of TA here at Champions Group. We are one of the leading HVAC, electrical, and plumbing companies here in the US. Aside from working in skilled trades, I've also worked in retail, nonprofit, media and entertainment. I've worked for companies as small as startups, as large as 10 to 15,000 people. Yeah, excited to be here and chat.
One of the many interesting things I think about you and your job and the way you approach it is you have the unique challenge of having 19 different local brands and a need to have some kind of consistency, some kind of employer brand. And you've obviously grown by acquisition, which is how you got the 19 brands, right? So how are you approaching this quilt, if you will, of all these different names and systems even?
Yeah, it's definitely been a tough task. When I arrived here about 2 years ago, we did have a lot going on. There was a lot of processes, procedures, ways that we were doing things that honestly made it a little chaotic for the team. So one of the first things that we had to do was really understand what it is that the brands were trying to accomplish. From a hiring standpoint, we really looked across the board and said, hey, reached out, had conversations, and really just wanted to find out what it is that we wanted to do. Was it really focusing on quantity of hire? Were we looking to just hire a bunch of people, who were breathing, or were we looking to, up the quantity and look at, or sorry, not the quantity, up the quality and look at the quality of hire across the board. Aside from that, we really wanted to look at how we were positioning ourselves really in the market when it came to jobs. It is a very competitive space that we're in, working in skilled trades. So finding the experienced folks is always going to be hard. So really thinking about how we were able to position ourselves, how we're able to market ourselves and really attract the right candidates that we're maybe looking for. So for us, it really started with our brand. So really understanding what our brand is, and we've actually developed recently the Champions Group brand, which is it's more or less our collective brand. So it's where all of our brand that we are working with and supporting kind of identify with. As well as keeping their own, identity within the regions that they operate in currently. So, with that in mind, and with understanding, okay, we have one now we have one large brand. We have, we're developing an EVP. We're doing all these cool things. How do we now roll that out and make sure that this is now getting to the candidates? It's getting to the employees, and really everyone, internally and externally has an understanding of who we are, what we do, as well as what we're looking for. So, few first steps that we took was really just standardizing our job descriptions. We didn't really feel the need to have 5 different variations of HVAC service techs across all brands. So we standardized our job descriptions and our job postings as well. And what that did was that helped us to minimize and make the application process a little bit quicker for folks who were searching for roles. Helped us to put specific keywords in there that maybe pop in searches and really look at that aspect of things. A few other things that we really looked at is what is our process? What is our interview process? How are we actually sourcing folks? How are we looking for folks? And realize that it's true. There is a shortage of skilled, experienced HVAC and plumbers out there. The need has never gone away. We had COVID happen, and our need actually went up because people were buying new homes, people were upgrading their HVAC units, people were upgrading their plumbing. So our need actually increased during that time and has continued to increase over the last few years as well. So one way.
Let me just interject. And I've heard the stat that for every 7 people retiring in your industry, there's only one new person coming into it.
Correct.
So is it aspirational or a luxury to think that you can upgrade quality when you're just short of people. I mean, how are you dealing with a complete dearth of people who are, because you need qualified people, right? You can't
Yeah.
just pick anybody up that's interested. You need people with actual certifications, right?
Absolutely. So there are a couple ways that we have, we've kind of tried to combat that. One is really looking for transferable skills. So identifying what it is that makes a good technician, makes a good, plumbing tech or HVAC tech, and really looking for those transferable skills in different spaces. So we've actually created in-house our own training program where we have gone out to various channels, whether it's folks who are working in customer service, folks who are working maybe in sales and in a different industry, and we train them on the HVAC and plumbing piece so that they can get the technical side as well as the sales side for some folks as well. We haven't necessarily closed it off to just folks with customer service skills. We've also tapped into local organizations as well as local trade schools as well, and worked with them to identify folks who maybe already have the HVAC or the plumbing experience, but now need the sales experience, and we train them in that space as well. So we've tried to do it in a number of ways and tried to continue to get more flexible over time. Whether that's working with the military to find folks who are transitioning to being civilians. Whether that's working with local high schools, because not everyone wants to go the traditional college route. Some folks want to just jump in and start working. So working with, and of course, working with different community organizations as well, who are training people in the trades and really taking, again, those transferable skills, bringing folks on who have those skills and then training them with the I want to say the basics, I guess, with the core skills that they're going to need to be successful in, whether it's HVAC or plumbing, or even electrical in some cases.
Right. And I think people don't understand how much money you can make in the skilled trades.
Yeah,
It's not necessarily a low income career. I mean,
yeah,
I'm amazed to hear, solid six-figure incomes at people doing skilled trades, particularly
yeah.
once they get to a manager level.
Yeah,
Um,
absolutely. And they can make, I mean, they can make six figures without being at a manager level. And with what we do, it is a combination of the technical side as well as the sales side. So that's the part that we work on educating people about is, hey, you can make a lucrative career out of this, and it's not going to take you 10, 15, 20 years to get to this point. 2 to 3 years into the industry, you can be making six figures if you're committed. So.
Uh, And I've got to believe, given that you've grown by acquisition and you're still keeping local brands alive, I got to believe you're getting some pushback from folks who've been doing this a long time, have their way of doing it, and all of a sudden you come in and say, "Oh, I've got a new process, I've got a new job description." How are you dealing with that without alienating people? I mean, you can shove it down their throats because you now own them, but I suspect that's not your style.
No, no. So a lot of what we build is we have to build it with flexibility in mind. So um, also just the fact that we operate in different markets, what works in Cincinnati, for example, may not be the same thing that works in Sacramento, or may not be the same thing that works in San Diego. So we have to really be flexible based on market, based on conditions. Phoenix, for example, we have four brands in Phoenix. Excuse me, we have four brands in Phoenix, and within that area, that's of course a heavy HVAC area. I mean, for 6 months out of the year, they're in the hundreds, so the need is always going to be there. But that may not necessarily be the case in Denver, Colorado. So we really have to think about, okay, what is our approach to seasonal hiring? What's our approach to when we're hiring, how we're hiring, when we're getting folks trained up. And then really thinking about, okay, what are some things that maybe speak to people in a specific area from a job posting standpoint. So we'll create the job postings, we'll write them in a very standard way. And then from there, we'll still allow that flexibility to be there. Same with our processes and our procedures. There are some cases where we may need a technician because we've got a big job happening and we need that person within 3 to 4 days. And maybe we've got somebody in mind, and maybe we have a technician role open, but we'll be able to pivot and say, okay, let's hire someone as an apprentice, someone who can get hands-on training, bring them on board. Let's look at maybe how they can now go out on a job with the skilled tech. They can learn, and they essentially end up getting in-house training. So it's not necessarily a part of our training program, but it's still a part of our training and how we're bringing folks on board and how quickly. So where our process may say 5 days to bring to onboard somebody, we also have the flexibility to do it in 2 if we need to. So.
Wow. But I assume that you've standardized your tech stack and centralized things like your programmatic and so forth. I've got to believe there are big savings there, right? If you did
Yes,
all of that.
huge savings that we've seen there. I think where a lot of people were, I can actually speak to us specifically. When I started, we were really only focusing our posting on Indeed and ZipRecruiter. We have moved away from that. We, of course, still utilize both of those services, but we also are using programmatic as well. In a lot of cases where we're expanding our outreach, we're getting far more candidates. I think this year we're on pace to have triple the candidates that we had last year for the same spend. So we are seeing a lot more traction in our roles. We're also seeing a lot more traction. Sorry, not a lot more traction. We're seeing a lot more in the space of our sourcing as well. So we've actually built in standardized some of our text templates and things of that sort to make sure that the messaging that's going out is personalized, but also still reaches the folks that it needs to reach, and it's done quickly. We've automated some of our communications within our ATS, which we recently implemented a new ATS back in October. We've got texting now where we're able to reach out to candidates fairly quickly, and we've got some automations built in there for texting. We're utilizing AI for interview notes so that we can have quick interview notes and quick summaries on interviews. So there is a lot of stuff that we have done internally, and that's what has helped to get buy-in across the board and across all brands, is when they see that we're now being more efficient, we're able to get people hired on a lot faster. We're also able to get people in the door for interviews a lot faster. Just by some of the automation that we've created, they generally are feeling a lot more comfortable. Also, the visibility as well. They all have full transparency into the system. They can all go in, see where candidates are in the process. They get daily, updates, and that has definitely helped to, really build. I don't want to say build the trust, but that's what it is. Build that trust with TA to see that, hey, we are getting the people that we need, and we're getting them fairly quickly as well.
That happens when you roll it out successfully. So congrats, because that's not we've seen with so many different, versions of what you're doing, that can be tough to do. So, but my last question to you,
Sure.
What's been the most challenging thing? What was the thing as you were trying to standardize this and bring some order to what were undoubtedly 19 different processes and so forth? What was the thing that really either tripped you up or gave you a run for your money?
I think it was the initial buy-in. That was really the thing that tripped me up the most. I mean, when you approach a manager who is used to probably used to posting ads in a newspaper or doing things in a different way, a non-conventional way, which happens when you're a 50 to 100 person company and you're working with a limited budget for recruiting, and you maybe don't necessarily have someone in place that understands recruiting and just the talent market as a whole, and you're trying to bring new ideas, there's usually a lot of pushback. So it was a year, process to say, hey, here's what this is going to do. Here's how this is going to save us money, make us more efficient, make sure we get candidates in the door, a lot quicker, make sure we are able to get more candidates, but also improve our quality of candidate. And you kind of put all that together. That's what helped move that change. I think the kind of second biggest challenge that we had was just how do we brand these individually? How do we consolidate what we have, where we've got 5 different versions of a service technician as a job posting, and now consolidate that into one single one, so that we're not necessarily having to go and find 5 different versions to post for 5 different brands. What are some commonalities that we can look for within these and essentially make one? And then how can we bring that to the managers and say, hey, we have now this new version, but it's still flexible. We can still add things as needed. We can still take things out, so on and so forth. So it was really just a change management piece, I think, across the board. Usually when there's something new, it's a little tougher to get that buy-in. So
Right. And you took a manager from placing a physical newspaper ad to programmatic with AI interview notes.
Yeah.
I mean, you just think about that leap. It's pretty. You left over several technologies there.
Oh yeah.
And I suspect if you're hiring a local business where you may have a general manager who started the business themselves, and had no need to keep up with HR technology. This was all brand new, so I understand that there was a lot of education that went on. I think it's fascinating. It's so many moving parts. I'm not at all surprised that the buy-in was the hardest. It's always the people that are hardest, but the technology is pretty easy. You just plug it in.
Yeah.
It's getting the adoption and having it used well, but having the success to share with people. So I
Yes.
think it's a great story. I could talk to you all day about it, but I think it'll be really interesting for our listeners just to sort of step back and understand it gets really complicated out there. So I appreciate it. But thanks so much for talking with us. I appreciate it.
Absolutely. Thank you.
Bye.